Today, before I start, I should admit that sitting there and being a final panelist, it's quite hard. The reason is, as Rajat and Nikhil were asking a question, I was like, okay, this is done. This is done. so, so one learning is I need to prepare at least a set of additional questions to make sure that. Perfect. So I request both Shubh and Ali to make sure that be candid and let's see actually how we can add further value into the discussion what we are planning to have. So I had few thoughts which let me just actually continue with what Nikhil ended with. I'll start with you, Ali. We spoke about the build versus buy at the end, and if you look at the Rockwell and the Honeywell, and they have built solutions on top of Splunk. It's almost like a white labeling, right? And with this happening, do you see there's a depth of DIY data platforms in the enterprises? So it's like they're building and they're building on top of it and stop buying it.
So first off, I think starting off with a contrarian view is a great way to be like the last panelist, right? So I think there's a lot of AI out there that stands for artificially inserted, right? And I think that's something we have to get past, right? I think that's something that, as an ecosystem, and for those of us who are building like partner platforms, I've had the privilege of being part of 2 of those at Microsoft and now at Cisco, Splunk. We have to look at how do we see where value is, right, in this whole AI journey. And so you asked about Honeywell, Rockwell, others, building platforms and IP. That's one facet of how to get their customers value. Another facet of it is how do you sort of take that platform, whether you build it yourself or on top of something, and really solve a customer problem quickly, right? It could be a very simple problem. It doesn't have to be the most complex problem for AI to add some value to it, right? And I think that's something that we have to get past, right? You don't have to build the platform in order to get that, use case that really drives value. I think I've had some customers that I was telling someone in the healthcare space, I have a customer who's in pharmaceutical manufacturing, and they were able to take just the login data of the foreman and correlate it with defects in the manufacturing space. When the foreman's there, defects go down. When the foreman's not there, defects go up. Massive value savings, right? But a very simple use case.
Perfect. Shubh, just to add on to this, so now when we see that the enterprise are preferring or navigating towards the pre-built platforms or they're investing into it, do you need to see for a mid-segment, high-growth service provider, do you need to differentiate differently? Do you need to position differently to attract the new services?
Let me understand your question. So are you saying because the IP is now getting built by
the enterprises,
enterprise
product
companies?
Do we need to differentiate or change your value propositions? Because now the plumbing is done by the enterprises. Yeah. So do you need to up the game?
Understood. First of all, thanks for having me. So I don't think so, because we are in the business, and Pranay and Jason spoke about this in the previous panel. We are in the business of creating enterprise apps, right? So first of all, although a lot of times when we are having conversations with new prospect clients, it starts with how do we get to value, what AI products do we need? But then what we quite frequently find out is that the data foundation is not ready. So the work starts with setting up the data foundation, the engineering work, the governance work, setting up the data stack. Once we are there, then the conversation obviously shifts to AI, right? Mm-hmm. And see, this IP question, obviously, it's one of those things for all tech services CEOs, right? We all want to build IP. We all like the fascination of being a software IP company, and we want to sell licenses and so on. But To be honest, we at Tredence have made a decision to stay away from that and focus on what we call accelerators. Because most clients today, let's say they have a choice, the choice to choose between a product company, an application company, and start from scratch, build a new product from scratch. And if they start from scratch, then obviously it's going to take a long time, and you compromise on the speed dimension. If you start with a product, then quite often you're surprised after you bought the licenses that it really doesn't work for you, so you have to do a bunch of customizations, and that customizations end up becoming too expensive and kind of beats the purpose of buying the license in the first place. But what they need is, they need the best of both these worlds, right? And that's where we come into the picture. Companies like Tredence and Fractal come into the picture because what we have are business solutions, domain solutions, which gives you enough flexibility to do what you need to do to meet the nuances of your business. But at the same time, you're not starting from scratch. You are kind of 50, 60% already there, and you build the last 40, 50%. To build the solution and deliver the value to your clients.
Okay. Thank you. I think just to follow that up, we heard Ravi also spoke about the focus on the IPs or softwares by the services players. Majorly, we are seeing that as a trend in the global system integrators, the big ones, right? And we have seen that at the recent the Cisco Live, which happened. We have seen I think this year maybe 6 to 7 Splunk-led solutions, and that was quite well appreciated by the Splunk as well. So do you see that threatens enterprises like Cisco as well? So where do you believe they're eating a pie of the services or the end solutions game here? So are they eating into your pie of the wallet?
So I'm going to echo what I think Jason said earlier, maybe in a different way. I think of partnerships as a network good, right? I think if there are other services companies that are building IP, I think that's fantastic. In fact, in our new Cisco partner program, we're going to value that, right, as something that is a benefit of those top tier partners, because you can measure certifications and badges, but those walk out the door with people. Solutions and IP are sticky, and they're part of the DNA of the organization that you're part of, right? And so we really want to see more of that coming out there, right? And we will partner with all sorts of folks. Some cases they will be competitive in some ways, in other cases they'll be partners of ours and others.
Okay, got it. So Shubh, so you spoke about focusing on the non-IP and building on the business. The use cases. The one more trend, what we are seeing is now the platform companies are looking towards that forward deployed engineers. So I'm just trying to understand, will that coming into picture? So will that impact the way you look into the business as a new player coming to the market?
Yeah, I think it's a fancy new word that we are hearing quite a lot nowadays. FDEs, forward deployed engineers. I think the term was coined by Palantir. But now we hear OpenAI using them too. By the way, what it basically means is you have these people who can do two things. First, they can customize. So think of an AI solution to be a combination of a brain and the rest of the body. The brain is the model. The rest of the body is the rest of the engineering to make it work in the context of your architecture. So the brain, what these FDEs do is they would customize, basically create a wrapper on top of one of the frontier models, vectorization, RAG, some prompt engineering work to make the customized brain work for that use case. And the engineering part is about building the rest of the, doing the plumbing, the scaffolding to make it work in the context of the enterprise from a data perspective, from a workflow perspective, and so on, right? And this is something we have been doing for several years now. So it's a new term, but this is the kind of work that we've been doing for a while. In fact, I will extend the definition and say there are two additional things that we do, and I'm sure other peer companies in our space do as well, which is, we are also building not just creating wrappers on top of the existing frontier models, the foundational models, but also doing SLM work, right? Where the starting point is a Qwen or a DeepSeek, where you have more flexibility to tweak the weights of the model, right? And you can optimize cost much more effectively. And second is your ability to not just do the engineering work, but actually doing the process consulting work, right? If I'm going to disrupt a supply chain optimization, a supply chain process, that's an S&OP process, it's very important for my consultants to understand the process and then figure out a way to redesign and reimagine that process using maybe a combination of autonomous and semi-autonomous agents. And then so do a bunch of this advisory work before you actually start building the brain and the body, right? So what we are trying to do is kind of extend this definition of FDEs and provide this end-to-end value creation journey for our customers.
Okay, good to understand. So, Ali, we always heard the reason enterprises never, or like till now, never got into services was because of the margins. So there's a fault line between a platform and the services, what you've typically observed. And now with this coming into picture, the way I understand is Splunk, as of Splunk, you always relied on GSIs and SIs to drive those customization towards your end customers. And do you see a reason for you to look into similar kind of a model where getting into services, or you're happy with the way it's being done now?
Yeah, so I think maybe I'll take that question in terms of like, do we do professional services? Does Cisco do professional services? And my prior employer, I spent a decade in Microsoft's consulting services captive organization. There will always be a need for setting that first new product introduction, that NPI, with some of your own engineers, right? But I think there's value to having partners who understand the industry, who have different use cases, right? If I take like the x-axis of all the use cases that our products can actually perform for our customers, and then the y-axis is all the customer demand, there's a lot of white space here that we need professional services organizations to fill in, right? We're never going to be an SAP certified organization, right? Internally at Cisco or at Splunk. However, we definitely want to partner with SAP. Same thing with AWS and Databricks and others, right? And so I think there's always going to be an opportunity for partnering in that services space, even though we may have our own services arm. And frankly, a lot of cases, I think $1 billion of Microsoft's consulting services was subcontracted to the GSIs anyway, right? And so there's a definite value to working with those service providers and frankly enabling them, right, to have that sort of technology at scale.
Perfect. So before I open it for the audience questions, no, I do have questions with me. So, but if I look at, we always when you look at the value chain, it's always who builds, who owns, and I would say that like who owns the customer. That's quite important because the profit pool is higher towards or near to the customer, right? And Ali, I'll start with you. Now, we have seen that considering your SIs develop solutions, and there's, for example, Accenture's Continuum is built on Splunk. Do you see with this, the solutions being built on Splunk and this co-creation or a co-engineering or a co-development, what we see here? So with this, do you see any challenge of they owning the customer relationships than the platform? And will that be a challenge for you, or will that be a risk for you?
Yeah, so I don't like to think of customers as homogeneous, right? I mean, in a lot of cases, we may have IT relationships, and we're going to continue to have those strong IT relationships with our customers. But in the solution that you mentioned, Accenture can open doors on the FinOps side that really brings us into the AIOps ecosystem. So there's different buyers at those customers that they can own the relationship with, and we can jointly be able to go to market. And that's not just the case with the GSIs. There's a lot of boutique SI firms and even managed service providers that really own those relationships and have been with those customers for decades, and we want to be able to take advantage of that opportunity to showcase the value we can do for our customers. So I don't think it's a necessarily a question of like who owns the account per se, because the accounts aren't really homogeneous.
Okay. Sure. The same question, I would say slightly different. If you look at the core development, what we see is sometimes if you don't own the customer, end of the day, it will be a feature on a product or a solution which a Splunk or any other platform would be selling, right? So the Tridents or any service provider's name may not come out. So do you see that as a challenge, or is there a way to address that when you work on some similar core developments?
Yeah, it can be a challenge, but that's why it's important that you have a seat at the table. I think Pranay broke down the value chain in a certain way. I'll do it a little differently. So, most of these conversations starts when the client knows that he or she needs to do something. Let's say start on a modernization journey, but he or she doesn't know exactly how to, right? So you get into the conversation as early as possible, help frame that conversation, shape that conversation, put that blueprint together, right? Then the next stage is, I would say, the build, right? Actually building the data product, the AI product. And by the way, building an AI product and data product is different from a traditional application, right? Because it's a lot more probabilistic, it's a lot more iterative. You have to deal with, hallucinations and other things which are, which were not there in previously, the business heuristics applications that we used to create, right? Then the next phase is the change management adoption, which sometimes, again, is crucial, because if the product is not adopted, then, obviously our channel partners will not be happy, Databricks will not be happy, because their revenue comes based on consumption. Obviously, the client will not be happy if they don't get the value, right? So you have to navigate all those interesting dynamics between IT and business and so on and so forth, right? And last but not the least, Vijay, is the new form of managed services in our world, right? Which is ML ops and AI ops, which is about making sure that whatever you built, right, which is a probabilistic solution, continues to operate at a high degree of accuracy. So you continue to manage drift. You have to make sure that it's secure, responsible AI and all of those things, right? So, providing that this, making sure that you are partnering with the customer through this, value creation journey. If you're able to do that, then you will continue to be extremely relevant and a trusted partner to our clients. And that's what at Tridents we are looking to do.
Perfect.
I'll just add, I think you're right in the fact that developing AI use cases is different, right? And sometimes it's just bringing new data to bear, right? So we know that right now, 55% of the data that enterprises have is machine data that's in logs and sensors and, things that aren't actually in their LLM models today. And so having consultants who can actually figure out where the data is trapped, 70% of that data is in OT use cases, right, in the factory floor, and then bring that into the enterprise use cases. I think that's a completely different skill than what we've seen before in terms of application development.
Yeah, and if I may add something else, I think running a product business is very different from running a services business. The P&L is different. The way you think about R&D or go-to-market is very, very different, right? A platform like Databricks is really good at building that horizontal technology product, right? And I was in Ali's keynote back in June during the conference. The way he laid out, how analytics is evolving, how AI is evolving, how they launched a new product called Lakebase, which is now they're trying to get into the OLTP space, not just OLAP. Sorry if I'm geeking out too much, but we will. We don't want to be in that business, because we want them to actually lead with that roadmap, with that strategy. What we want to do is actually build those business solutions, right? How do you help a chief marketing officer make their campaigns more effective? How do you help a chief supply chain officer, manage their inventories better, right? So we are in that business, Vijay. So this this whole conversation around competing between a product company and services company, I think it's a irrelevant question.
Okay. So I would just open it for the audience if anyone specific on the platform side or the services, what we heard till now.
Sure. One question for you: How, in terms of hiring leaders, how is it changing now in the next 5 years? What kind of leaders are you looking for compared to what the kind of leaders you were hiring before?
Yeah, it'll be a very Tredence-centric point of view. We are looking for leaders who can manage that balance between, looking at the forest and also get into the trees when you need to get into the details, right? That problem-solving DNA is very important, right? Although I joked about geeking out, but the ability to geek out is important. When you go to a conference, Databricks conference or a Splunk conference, understanding the technicalities of the new features that are being announced is important. Because if you are not able to do that, then you will not be able to actually articulate the value proposition to a customer in the context of, of a problem that is being discussed. So being technically inclined, you don't have to actually code yourself, but having a strong technology DNA is super important. Being a generalist doesn't work anymore. So that's number one, Pari. Number two is having depth in one or two domain areas is also super important, because in the services the industry, at the end of the day, you have to be either a very good sales guy, right? Or you have to be a very good delivery guy, right? So in order to be a good sales guy, you have to be a good consultative sales guy. You have to be able to articulate the value proposition. How exactly are you going to move the needle in the context of a specific problem, right? So your ability to combine your understanding of the underlying technologies and the underlying domain vectors into a solution, and how that business case will help that customer get his next promotion, right? I think we are looking for leaders who can do both.
It's okay. Okay. So I had a question. I think we heard quite a few panelists, but this point somehow didn't make it to the top. So I'm wondering whether it's important or not. One of the things that we've heard a lot is that, and we heard Pranay as well, we heard others, that services company are almost the last mile where you're implementing the data or the technology solution. And to do that, you need to articulate like you said, articulate the value proposition and outcome. At the same time, to do that, you need industry or domain expertise, right? Now, everybody agrees that you need that, but we are not seeing a lot of it in the numbers. So for example, when I say we need domain expert in retail, somebody is going and hiring from Infosys, a retail person in that team, or going to Cognizant and hiring somebody in healthcare in that team. That to me is not real domain expertise, right? Are we hiring doctors, nurses in healthcare? Are we getting people from the floor from Tesco, etc.? One, do you think I'm over exaggerating the need for domain? Is it enough to hire people from like parallel industries who know that industry? Or how really important is it to have core industry expertise to solve problems?
I think the domain depth is extremely important. Otherwise, you're just a technology guy. You're not a business consultant. What we do, Siddhant, right? Yes. What we do is maybe we don't go all the way and hire a nurse, but what we do is, for example, in retail, we would go and hire from large retailers, right? Or we would go and hire from specialist retail companies like Nielsen or IRI, right? In healthcare, we would go and hire from Epic, right? And people who really understand the data and the deep domain experimentations that are happening in that space. So yeah.
Yeah, I think, to Shubh's point, that there's no substitute for that domain knowledge. Now, in some cases, domain knowledge may translate, right? So you may be able to say, okay, because we have a clinician who's one of our systems engineers, right? And can speak that language across healthcare, right? And so maybe you can do a broader sort of category of that. But without that domain expertise, you're not going to be able to get to the customer pain points fast enough, right? I think you're going to have to go through a different set of challenges unless it's a pure technology problem, which most of those are pretty easily solvable by the enterprises themselves.
Interesting. Thank you.
Anyone? Great. So last question before I close out. So how do you see the relationship or a partnership between a platform and a services panning out over maybe next couple of years or till next 5 years? And any major changes do you see the way it's?
Yeah, so I think we see a point in time right now where it's an inflection, right? And that relationship needs to change. And that's why we're rolling out a new partner program. And I think, a lot of different large platform players are rolling out these new partner programs. And we're thinking really hard and long about who are those partners that are going to take us to the next level, right? Mm-hmm. And those partnerships, I think Ravi talked about customer outcomes. We want those partners who will be able to execute, that ability to execute. And so that means, not just consultative selling, but also, managing services. Mm-hmm. That also means IP. I think we've talked a lot about all those being different facets. I call those different colors of money. Those partners that drive different colors of money are the ones that we want to see percolate to the top.
Okay.
Yeah. Look, I think in the last 15 years, we have seen the digital engineering wave, and I think we are still there, but I think it's in its later stages of maturity. In my industry, data and AI, I believe we are still in early stages, and what we have seen in the last 5 to 7 years is plenty of data migrations moving into cloud, and now the question about value is going to become more and more important and pertinent. Mm-hmm. Now, of course, there is the new trend is to build agents, and how do you drive value off of those agents? But I think the value question, Vijay, is going to be extremely crucial and important. And this is going to be very important both for the platforms on top of which we're building the solutions, mm-hmm. as well as for us to be credible partners, right? And simple things, what Gen AI, one of the key features of Gen AI is that you are able to organize your data better, right? I think some of the companies, including us and Palantir and others, are doing some really interesting work in creating ontologies and semantic layers and knowledge graphs using Gen AI, right? And also the BI, right? How do you actually democratize data a lot more effectively, right? How can a retail clerk actually have access to a device which he or she can use and just ask a natural language question to get a quick response, right? So these things are going to happen. It will only accelerate, and this question about ROI and where the value is going to come from is going to become extremely important. And yeah, we are very focused on that.
Great. Thanks a lot. Thanks once again for taking time and being here and being candid to share your stories. Thanks a lot. So.